to get there. We have to talk about insults everyone should know. Like, what
Oh
the
yeah,
heck is
insults
that?
everyone
Like,
should
where did
know.
that come from? Like, where is that in this whole? Am I at least chronologically
More or
correct
less, more or
point?
less. No, I wrote 2 books for Quirk Books, or I really compiled or edited 2 books for Quirk Books.
Right.
One was called Insults Every Man Should Know, which also got me on the radio and yelled at. I'll tell you about. But what happened was that a guy named Steven Seagal, not the actor, not the Aikidoka, who worked for
Not the
Weird
Russian,
Tales, and worked for
not the
Wild
Russian
Side Project.
agent.
Yeah, not the cop from Arizona, wherever he's living now, or on his reality show. Had worked for Weird Tales and World Side Press, and then had moved on after Weird Tales was either shut down or folded. Something crazy happened with it. That magazine's been bouncing around on and off for 85 years. And he got a job at Quirk Books. And he hired a lot of people from the science fiction world to write different books.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I think Nora Jemisin had a brief book with him about like geek wisdom. I think Catherine Valente wrote a novel. Quirk is famous for the Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. But they also do a lot of like small gift books, like books about alcohol, like cocktail recipes, and funny little gift books and joke books. And they had a series called Every Man Should Know. And they got around to insults, and the first person Steven Seagal thinks of is me. Like, I can definitely do this. And
so how did you compile it? I mean, did you just make this stuff up? Did you go to like the Devil's
Did
Dictionary?
you read my book? Did you read Insults Every Man Should Know? It's mostly
I did
famous
not.
insults throughout history.
Okay.
It is mostly famous insults throughout history with a little bit of flavor text about the nature of insults. Like I talk about Seneca and his advice against advice for people who are insulted about how to not feel insulted. We talk about what kind of insults to use, on what occasions, things like that. And basically, it was a very short book. It's a small gift book the size of a telephone these days. So it's the kind of thing you throw in a stocking, or you give a kid when he turns 18. Like, here you go, now you're a man, you're going to do this. Like a little gag book. And so it was 7 chapters of 3,000 words each. And every Sunday night, I'd come home from my martial arts class and take a shower and say, I'm writing 1 chapter. And wrote 3,000 words, or mostly cut and paste, but also by doing Google searches and looking at other books and correcting other books. For example, then Romeo and Juliet. Juliet's maid says of Juliet's first suitor, he's a man of wax. And a lot of insult books say this is an insult, but it's not an insult. It's a compliment. Mm-hmm. So I was able to fix other insult books by explaining, no, it means he has pale skin, he's a noble, and he looks like not like a wax statue, but certainly like a work of art where you cast things in wax before you cast a statue and stuff like that. So it was a compliment that people don't understand was an insult, or misunderstand it as an insult. And in fact, the copy editors at QuickBooks said, "Oh, this is the best book we ever worked on. It's all factually accurate. Not bad for a $10 joke book." And it was a work for hire book, so that just means I have no extra money. I just get the flat fee, which makes sense because it was their idea. They came to me with the idea. They came to me with a table of contents. So you want, insults about this, insults about that. So they even it was really just for me to fill out and do the research on and do the flavor text. And it is actually my best-selling book. It's been on 7 or 8.
And you're not getting any royalties because they just paid you a flat fee at the beginning.
No, but I got $3,000, and for not a lot of work, 7 Sunday evenings. And I paid off a credit card with it. Then they came back and said, "Oh, we want you to do quotes every man should know, and you did so well. Let's make you $4,000." And here's the table of contents. And at the end, they said, "Oh, we forgot to have quotes about women." "I'll write it," says the editor, "but it's still under my name." So I didn't even write the whole book. And $4,000 paid for my trip to Scotland.
Yep.
My little honeymoon. So that was nice too. And everyone does that kind of thing. You'll find Martin Amis, the very famous British novelist, son of Kingsley Amis. His first book was about video games, like how to beat asteroids. Arcade games from the early '80s.
Oh, wow.
And Neil Gaiman's first book was something like interviewing Douglas Adams, or like a book about Duran Duran. Everyone does these little books here and there. Or I don't know if you've seen Nightmare Alley?
Yeah, I did. I saw it last night. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a novel first, of course, by a guy named Gresham, and he had a crack up after that. The usual, I'm rich, I'm going to drink myself to happiness or not happiness. And he never wrote another novel, but he wrote other books. He wrote like a little kid's book about Houdini and like a little biography, and a kid's book to pranks and jokes and tricks, and a lot of short stories and crime and science fiction pulp magazines. He never really wrote another novel, but everyone, like I was saying, in the 20th century, that's what you did. You had these little projects you did, the pot boilers, keep the pots boiling on the stove, and then you worked on your real stuff in some other time. So insults and quotes were little pot boilers, made a lot of money for QuickBooks, made a few books for me with very little effort. And that's the kind of thing a writer can do if you're available and around and don't have a lot of preciousness about the skill.
All right, let's talk about some of your other books a little bit later. Let's talk about your current book, The Second Shooter, because you're obviously itching to talk about it. So what's the premise behind this? Like, how did this actually? Let me see how thick that thing is. You don't tend to write. That's the thickest, aside from the I am.
It is a very thick
Providence.
Book, but it is a thick book. Oh, sorry.
I think that's the thickest book I've ever seen from you.
It is book, but it's laid out to make it thicker than it should be.
Okay. All right.
So every chapter begins on the recto, which is the right page, and I think there's some blank versos and that kind of thing. But it's a little on the longer side. I think it's just south of 80,000 words, which is long for me.
Yeah, you're like 40 to 60,000.
50, 60,000 words,
yeah.
which is not usual for science fiction. Right, science fiction tends to want 80,000 words. They want series characters. They want slashable characters, so fans can write about them having sex, even if they don't have sex in the book. And they want Squeecore, Hope Punk, that kind of thing. You should have some Squeecore on here. Then you'll be very proud.
Let's talk about your book first. But you gotta explain
so the
this
to me.
Yeah, because you're sardonicore, and everyone needs to know that. Right, yeah. You're sardonic, but we'll so what's the premise behind this book?
The premise is of a writer who is writing a book called Rumors of a Second Shooter, and what he's doing is going around the country interviewing people who have survived mass shooting events, like a school shooting, a church shooting, other things. And as you know, and as you see in the newspaper and IAP Wire all the time, there's almost always reports of multiple shooters, and very rarely are there multiple shooters. There have been sometimes, like in San Bernardino, there were 2 shooters.
Right.
Columbine, of course, had 2 shooters. A couple times people team up, but usually it's a solo person. And we all know the second shooter is really just a matter of echoes, the fog and night of what seems like war.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, the cops show up and also start shooting, so you hear shooting from different directions. So people get confused. And people get confused, like people are running away, or the news media for shooters because they're doing this with the camera, that kind of thing. But in this case, the second shooters appear to be real, and there appears to be a great conspiracy where the main character's own work is being erased as he types it, and he starts getting followed around by drones, and he, of course, meets also a talk radio host with a strong conspiratorial alt-right bent, who, of course, calls all of these false flags, and everything that ever went wrong is a false flag. So everything's great. But he's also appealing to this writer, saying, hey, we should be friends. Let's be pals. Let's just have a make it up feud. Well, there's also, of course, a right-wing, super right-wing crazy, like even worse than Alex Jones. Mm-hmm. Not like a Joe Rogan type, like really kind of.
But Joe Rogan's like, I would say he's progressive with conservative characteristics.
I would say he's just dumb. He's just like, sure, I've got a guest. Oh, that sounds good. Next guest says the opposite thing. Oh, that sounds interesting. Wow. So if his booking agent put in Bernie Sanders and Noam Chomsky all the time, he'd be like, yeah, I like it. I like anarchist communism. We should definitely destroy capitalism. Sounds great.
Yeah, he's
just basically Oprah for dudes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You want to drink coffee with butter in it? Yeah, it's great. Look at my muscles. Don't vaccinate. Oh, definitely vaccinate. That's why he's saying, I want Trump. Yeah.
Focus.
Yeah.
Second shooter.
That's what he is for hours and hours. And then, as it turns out, it takes a supernatural turn. So it's really like a metaphysical thriller. And part of why it's a metaphysical thriller is because I started writing in 2016. And you
probably had to pull it after,
Well, there were many shooting events that spoiled many an editorial meeting because people get sensitive. but I finally sold it based on the first 20,000 words in a synopsis in early 2020. But in the interim, of course, we had Trump's election and conspiracy theories like QAnon and Pizzagate and the return of JFK Jr. and 5G vaccines and the ghost of Hugo Chavez controlling voting machines via Italian satellites. So it was no longer a satire. It was kind of a realist novel. So in order to make it weirder than reality, I had to change the third act quite a bit.
And then, okay, so when you said you had to change the third act, in what way, without revealing too much of the book? People obviously need to buy it.
So there's a anarcho-Marxist current from the 1960s called situationism, which looked at not the working class, but more about the imaginary world we live in, the world of the spectacle, where the news media, our culture tells us certain things are true, or confuses shit out of us purposefully so we don't know it is true. And of course, this is happening now to us all the time. The spectacle is a real thing, and it's very useful. It's not the end all be all. It's not the replacement for actual organizing or mass movements or that kind of thing. But it certainly tells us a lot about how the mediated world works. And this is a media experience. Like school shootings are real, mass shootings are real, but they're also heavily mediated. They have a mediated narrative. And
right.
So, as it turns out, via situationist magic, certain things can happen. Situation was always about slogans and kind of surreal juxtapositions of things, and I made them actual magic spells.
Okay,
that
so
somebody has access to.
So contrary to popular opinion, which is wrong, which is I think people are some people are calling it a science fiction book, but it's not. It's a
I would call it a fantasy novel or a metaphysical thriller. What you're alluding to out there in YouTube land is that the second shooter is on the Locus magazine recommended reading list for this year under the science fiction novel category. And for those who don't know, which is probably all 7 of you tuning in, is the Locus magazine recommended reading list is the ballot for the Locus Award. So if you have 15 minutes to spend digging through all this stuff, you can actually vote for this book after you read it, of course, because you don't want to just read it because I'm telling you to. And people talked about, there are science fiction elements in there, self-driving cars, there are drones, there's invisibility cloaks, but they're the day after tomorrow style science fiction. Like techno thrillers have technology that's not real, but they're not really science fiction. A Tom Clancy novel with an orbital, suborbital platform isn't really science fiction.
Right.
It has kind of elements of it, but so this is more of a metaphysical, fantastical thriller than a science fiction novel, I'd say as well.
And then how would you what's the closest comp to that book? Like if somebody is familiar with other authors, what's the closest in either writing style or subject matter? If they like something else, what would it be and why?
Michael Marshall Smith's Strumman.
Okay.
Which is another thriller. I want to be a total asshole about it. Probably Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Not because it's overwritten and has a lot of things, but it's about a mediated world and about the influence of media. And it has satirical elements. And the TV show Fringe. Mm-hmm. And to a certain extent, the TV show The X-Files. Mm-hmm. Surely, I actually prefer Fringe to The X-Files, so I'd say Fringe is definitely where I'm at.
Yeah, Fringe is more...
Yeah.
Like they at least try to have a not hard science, but a science fiction, like a science description behind some of these things.
Yeah.
And there's more
the characters are kind of weirder and more crazy, and they find themselves in the center of things, even though they should be on the fringe of things, Sean.
That's right. I'm a little slow. I'm a little slow tonight.
Is it late for you? Is it bedtime? It's only 8:30.
I'm not firing all cylinders right now, Nick. Okay, so where can they find it if they want to buy it?
Not Barnes & Noble.
Oh yeah,
that's right. It turns out.
That's right.
Let me tell you about friggin' COVID. What happened is this. So, 2 things happened. One, of course, is COVID, which we all know about, has caused a lot of supply chain problems from paper. Who's cutting down the trees? Who's making pulp? Sick people. How's it going? This stuff is printed in Denmark. How's it get from Denmark to America? On a boat. Is the boat on time? No, the boat's not on time. Where are the boxes? We don't know where the boxes are. Hey, Siren and Schuster, is it there yet? Maybe it is. The guy who looks at things are there on the loading dock isn't here. So the release date slipped twice, which happens to a lot of books, in this past autumn.
Right.
Because Omicron was so virulent. And luckily, it has not killed very many people compared to the number of people who've gotten it. But it's certainly, you don't want to be at work with this thing because you can get everyone you meet is going to get it. And that one person who's old or has a problem or is very unlucky is going to have a strong problem. So these things happen. At the same time, Barnes & Noble has new management. For the first time, it's not run by the Reggio brothers. It's run by the guy who runs Waterstone.
Yep.
Who, one, is not really a fan of science fiction. But more importantly, the science fiction buyer for a long time was this guy named Bill Kellen, who was laid off and not replaced. He was replaced by an algorithm. And so Barnes & Noble came up with, bing, 45 copies are due, all for B&N web orders, which ironically enough, even though I didn't get my books till December, and nobody can find the book till December, my friend Paul, famous writer Paul Tremblay, got his book on time. Because somehow the one little box came from Denmark and went right to BarnesandNoble.com. So the people who bought it there, got it way before anybody else did. But if you go to a Barnes & Noble store, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, you're being highly sarcastic. I'm assuming
no, this is all true. I'm annoyed. No, I'm not sarcastic. This is exactly what happened.
Oh, so they didn't prioritize Paul Tremblay because he had sells a ton of books, etc.
No, he just pre-ordered it. They don't know. The guy who's running BarnesandNoble.com has no idea who Paul Tremblay or anybody is.
No.
Yeah. So I'm there going, oh my God, my book's there. I'm on Twitter going, oh please, you got to pre-order my book. It's not anywhere. And then the 3 o'clock, I get tagged in a tweet. It's like, and Paul's there like, hey, I got Nick's book today.
Oh, he got your book. I thought he got his book. I'm like, what?
He bought a copy of my book. Isn't that nice of him? It should all be nice like Paul Tremblay. But he was the first one in America to get it, even before I got it. My author copies.
That's pretty random.
Oh, you're not going to get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it, of course, via the Evil Empire, who even Amazon had to go through Book Depository UK, which is, of course, owned by Amazon. So the first handful of books that were sold via Amazon were actual secret UK imports because they couldn't get their books on time either. So that's how messed up the supply chain was, that even Amazon couldn't get the books on time. Your local independent bookstore will get it, bookshop.org will get it. You can get it from me signed at booksinc.net. We'll put a link at the bottom of this. I'll send it to you after. And I go there once or twice a week. And I'm actually the best seller in that store.
That helps. It helps know people sometimes. It helps.
Yeah, it helps. I've worked in a bookstore. And you get the ebook. I recommend Drive-Through Fiction. That's THRU Fiction. Mm-hmm. Which mostly does role-playing games and things like that, but they have a fiction section, and Solaris, the publisher, also is heavily involved in like Warhammer and like other role-playing game stuff, so a lot of their books are carried in that. And that's good because you can get, for the same price on Amazon, the EPUB, the Kindle, both files, and they're yours. It's not DRM, it's not a license, it's not going to vanish one day. Those are your files that you can do whatever you want with. So it's a much better deal for the same price.
Outstanding. Now let's talk about some of your other books, but let's do it from the framework of your influences.
Sure.
Okay, so there's definitely, well, correct me if I go too far, Nick. There's definitely some Lovecraft. There's in at least one book there's kind of a beatnik influence.
Yeah.
There is kind of the well, I'll let you kind of continue the thread. So why H.P. Lovecraft? Some people are going to say he's got incredibly purple prose and writes a little bit of a Baroque style. But I think if I'm misinterpreting it, you enjoy his writing for certain reasons, and then there's things that are a little bit that are irascible in the writing that like any human being that lived in the early 20th century, they're going to have some some views that have changed since then.
Oh, you mean his racism? Well, he was racist even for then. Even for then, people were like, "Oh, that guy's racist." So it was like he was a guy of his time. Even his friends like, "What the hell?" His friends were like, "What the hell's wrong with you? You married a Jewish lady." He's like, "Well, she is all right, but the other Jews, oh my God." So everybody knew even then he was racist. Not a surprise.
So why Lovecraft?
Well, it's very mercenary in the way. My first novel is Move Underground, which is Jack Kerouac, Neil Cassidy, and William S. Burroughs meeting a Lovecraftian universe. And it was very mercenary, although it didn't work out for me. I was at a bookstore. I saw on the bargain shelf a copy of a book collecting Kerouac's letters. I thought, oh, wow, Kerouac's letters. They even want to read his letters, much less his books. Letters that people wrote to him. He must be really a big deal. And I noticed that Lovecraft also had collections of his letters. Like, oh, Lovecraft too. I was like, well, if they're going to read his letters, what if I put them together? Then all the Lovecraftians and all the Beat fans will want to read this book. That's not the case. In fact, the Venn diagram of, something like that, I guess. People who love the Lovecraft and the Beats read it.
I should have like a little graphic that like floats up on
the
screen.
You can do that for me. Yeah. So the very thin sliver who like both really enjoyed this book. Move Underground. But I will say, it sold in Germany. It sold to Greece. It was out for 10 years. I released it as Creative Commons to get some attention in the early days of ebooks, which came around to bite me in the ass when people started saying, oh, it must be a public domain book. So they're putting it up themselves on Amazon. Every 2 weeks I go say, nope, that's not my book. That's somebody else stealing my book. Because my Creative Commons license was free to read, not free to resell. So they're violating the license. It was in print for 10 years. It finally fell out of print a few years ago. After the publisher said, oh, you only sold 200 copies. I'm like, really? Because of the book scan. Because I work in publishing, says at least 600 copies. And we all know the book scan copies captured maybe about half the sales.
Or less than that, right?
Or less than half.
My experience has been about 4x is like what you actually sell versus. Now that includes ebooks and things like that, but that's based on one sample though. One sample, sample size of one. So take it with a grain of salt.
But the ebook was mine anyway. I owned the ebook outright, so it was always mine. But the print is usually around half, unless it's a certain kind of book that sells really well outside of bookstores. Like if you're selling a book about training dogs, it's going to be a lot of pet shops. So that might be 5x, 6x. You might be 90% of it might be missing from BookScan. But anyway, we made a deal, and finally, I was approached via Twitter DM one day. So keep your DMs open from a guy who read the book when it first came out in 2004. This was in 2019, saying, "Hey, I read your book when I was young, and now I work in publishing. Can I bring your book back out?" I said, "Of course you can." And it came back out last year with a new introduction by Brian Evanson, the famous literary writer, avant-garde fiction, also horror writer, and did pretty well. And so even though it was a mercenary thing, in the long term, it did kind of work out for me because most books aren't in print for 10 years. Most books don't get reissued within 15 years by a different publisher. And I had a few editions and made a few bucks, and it's been kind of influential in that people who read it 15 years ago now work in publishing or now are writers, and we're kind of inspired to try to be writers because of that book. So that's pretty good.
So what would you say your other influences are? So you have a little bit of H.P. Lovecraft, the Beatnik.
Yeah, Lovecraft and the Beats, and of course the intersection. William S. Burroughs was how I got into Lovecraft. I had gotten a book called The Starry Wisdom, was a collection of stories and comics and poems in celebration of Lovecraft, and Burroughs was in there. Michael Gira from Swans, kind of a post-punk dark band, was in there. I liked him at the time, and that kind of turned me on. So underground culture, which has embraced Lovecraft for many years. R. Crumb used to do comics of Lovecraft and that kind of thing. Beats, of course, underground stuff. Crowley, I'm not a Crowleyist, I'm not a magician, I don't believe in that stuff. But he's a compelling figure, so I've written a book about someone who is both a Trotskyist and a Crowleyite in 1989 on Long Island. Speaking of Cold War, at the beginning,
So for the for the person just kind of walking in off the street, he's talking about Aleister Crowley, who was a famous occultist in the
early 20th
century.
Early to mid 20th century, And
well, you did a lot of research for that too, right? You actually there are people who still kind of follow the way of, I guess it's called
yeah,
magic with
there
the
are a lot of
K.
weirdos out there who also have dumb ideas. Absolutely.
Well,
You
I'd
know,
be careful.
a lot,
I'd be
look, a
careful.
lot
You
of
never
people,
know. They could curse
a
you.
lot of
They could
people
curse you.
wake up every morning and their mother made them go to church, and they didn't like church without getting up early every Sunday morning and having something to do. And so now they go to anti-church. And that anti-church might be the Socialist Party selling newspapers, or it might be animal rights, or it might be naked mass with the Crowleyites. It might be anything. And that's just how a lot of people sort of operate in their lives.
Yeah,
So that
unfortunately.
book, Loves the Law, came out a few years ago. And I'm interested in like people like Harlan Ellison, who of course was a great essayist and a columnist for newspapers, and also a great science fiction writer of almost always short fiction. He wrote one not really interesting, two not really interesting novels, and co-wrote a couple of things that were almost novels. And I'm really not interested in the novel as much. I'd much rather starve better by writing short fiction and short nonfiction.
And you recently sold a story to Asimov's.
Yeah, my second story.
What's that? What's the story called? And roughly, what do people have to look forward to? Like when? And
that story is called "Drowned in the Sun," which is the title of the Nirvana song that was written by an AI pretending to be Nirvana. And I actually wrote that for a contest, for like a climate change science fiction Imagine the Future contest. But I think I wasn't squeak punk enough, or hope core, or whatever it is. I guess I wasn't, so I did not place in the contest. But I made one little change. I made one character a little nicer by having her give some information at the end instead of withholding that information at the end. Sent it off to Asimov's, and they enjoyed the story very much, and it should be coming out pretty soon. It's a cli-fi story, climate fiction story. And it's basically about an attempt to repopulate Cyprus, which of course in the future if the temperature goes high enough, is not going to have a very large population. Because they're right on the equator, it's politically fraught, super hot, sunny all the time, no clouds. It's not going to be a great place to live. Right now it's beautiful. You can go to Cyprus without getting COVID, definitely go for your vacation. But when it's 19C average, don't go. You're going to die. Yeah.
And then you're also, there's still kind of the island's still kind of split in half, right? You got the Turks on one side.
Yeah, split in two-thirds and one-third, yeah.
Okay. All right,
and that's a factor. That's a factor in the story as well.
Squeecore.
And that there's one Greek Cypriot and one Turkish Cypriot with different ideas about which to blow up to get a cloud cover over it, basically.
Okay, I'm going to kind of take a brief diversion.
Great.
Squeecore.
While you're thinking, I'm going to take a selfie of you and me. All right.
I don't even know what that's going to be used for. I should.
Go ahead.
Squeecore. What? Like? It see like I didn't even delve into it because it sounded more like one of those. How do I say this without drawing a firebomb on me for saying absolutely nothing? It's something completely not.
You're gonna die already. You're gonna cancel. So I'll just tell you what Squeecore is. Squeecore, and I called this in Starve Better, my book that is now out of print, Fantatwee, back in 2008. Squeecore is fiction that is heavily influenced by contemporary fan fiction discourses. That's really what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. So not the fan fiction of the old days, like Kirk and Spock in a mimeograph magazine, sold at a convention for $1. Who were people like, Vonda McIntyre came out of that, Diane Duane came out of that. A lot of people wrote fan fiction as well as writing normal science fiction and fantasy. And of course, this remains the case today. Many famous writers today out there starting fan fiction. But there seems to be, in the past 10 years or so, and more so now, even then, were people who got their interest in writing from fan fiction in the online environment of fan fiction as opposed to the old days of fan fiction. And the online environment of fan fiction is a lot about community service. Like you're writing for your friends about what they want to see, and they're writing for you, and you talk about it, and you also want to care for your friends and not upset them and not traumatize them. Even though fan fiction also has a lot of traumatic material involved in it, including things like, a lot of stories about rape, Harry Potter getting raped by Snape and things like that. That's kind of an entertainment for some people who enjoy fan fiction. There's nothing wrong with that, except for the writing, probably.
Right.
Yeah. And now a lot of these people have, branched out and are writing their own work. And it tends to have some of that same material in it, and where it focuses on a certain kind of melodrama that is easily resolved, as opposed to complexified. Characters, when they do something wrong or have a bad thought, are either instantly punished or are corrected by the narrative. And if you don't do that, there's an expectation that you, the author, are bad and are trying to do something bad. Except that now in fan fiction, and you have a community where you know your readers, and they know you, and they talk all the time, and you have a friendship, or at least a parasocial friendship. Well, publishing is a broadcast. I publish a book, and if it's not this one, it's in Barnes & Noble. I have no idea who's buying the Barnes & Noble, or no idea who's buying it on Amazon. And it's supposed to be a one-way relationship. You're not supposed to come to me, Nick, and say, you know what, you really upset me when you said that you didn't like Wendy's hamburgers.
Don't buy the book.
Yeah. I already bought the book. I had to buy the book without reading it. You owe me, big buster, that kind of thing. So it happens a lot.
So what was the controversy? Like, why is this even a controversy?
Because people in the Squeecore don't like being called Squeecore. They think they're being made fun of, which is correct. And it's unfair. Because if you're going to create a movement, you're going to say this kind of book is happening with this background, these antecedents. You don't need to evaluate it on a taxonomal level, in the same way I won't say, well, crime novels came out of the professionalization of the police force in the late 19th century, and are about dealing with urbanism and the authority of the state, and I'm an advocate of crime fiction sucks. Like that's not a way to approach anything like that. And Squeecore, of course, sounds funny, and I can't stop saying it. I bring the conversation all the time. I was at Jack in the Box before saying, "Oh, can I just have the people at Squeecore? Maybe they want to know."
Wow.
And I wasn't. This is not, again, you tell people I'm sardonic, but actually I never joke, and I never say anything amusing. I'm just telling you what is literally going on in my head and in my experiences. So I was at Jack in the Box thinking, these guys want to know about Squeecore. Can I work it into the conversation when I buy my hamburger? I could not. They were very busy.
So what's your go-to meal there? Mine's a jumbo jack.
Double jack. Yeah, no cheese.
Yeah.
I don't like it there. It's just across the street.
It's convenient.
So
it's open at all hours.
Yes, it's convenient. That's what fast food is, right? It's cheap and fast. It's definitely not either aesthetically or nutritionally good.
No.
But I had to do this thing with you, so I need to eat fast.
No, so it's my fault. Okay.
Yeah, as usual. Yeah.
All right. Tell me a little bit about you have actually two stories, one in Weird World War III, and then one in Weird World War IV.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, if you could discuss each one and look, they're definitely political, which I think we need more of in terms of kind of broadening that ideological spectrum, right, and showing kind of both sorts of things. But you're definitely on the as we discussed in the beginning, the anarcho kind of communist side. But I like I said, I think they're both amazing stories. But let's just.
So I'm such an asshole, Sean, that I forgot the name of the story in Weird World War III. I remember everything about it, but what did I? Oh yeah, Bad Night at Blackrock, right? That was the name of it.
Bad Night at
Blackrock.
Bleak
That's a place in Cyprus.
Bleak Rock. I think it's Bleak Rock. Bleak.
The copy editors, they made a Bleak Rock.
I should know too. So I'm you don't need to be embarrassed because.
So as we talked about Cyprus, and I'm not Cypriot, or mostly not Cypriot. I have some Cypriot long background. But Cyprus, as we were talking about, is a divided island between the Greek-speaking and Turkish-speaking populations. For many, many centuries, they mixed together. It was only relatively recently they were split up. And there was always some sectarian violence here and there, but never until post-colonial times and invasions of military governments of Greece and invasion of Turkey, and then everything messed things up. So this first story, Bad Night at Blackrock, I think, takes place during a battle, or in the aftermath of a battle, where a sort of a mythic Turkish figure is implicated in some violence. And the communist is captured because they were considered to be in league with the Turks, because they weren't hyper-nationalists. And because he doesn't believe in the supernatural does not impact him at all. He cannot perceive it. But everyone else is having a rough time of it, being eaten and things like that. So that's one story. In Weird World War IV, it's a science fiction story in the classic mode of a spaceship. And it is a spaceship of objectivists who left this Earth behind to gulch it out in space. And their AI that controls
I enjoyed the not so oblique reference to was it Dammershold or the pirate,
right,
pirate from the
Shrugged,
not the Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, right?
Yeah.
I appreciated that. That was pretty good.
And there's a certain strain of economic thought that would say that a true free market, a free market with no state interference whatsoever, would be indistinguishable from full communism. Because you couldn't collect capital that much without the state to help you. And everything would be voluntary. And comes supposed to be bottom down, networked a cyberized economy. So are they the same thing? So in this case, the AI on the ship that controls the economy or controls the markets, because everything's marketized inside this Randian economy, creates a second AI that's a communist AI to check its work. And it does this after an event in space that convinces it that something else is going on out there in the world, out there in the universe, about the creation of things that didn't previously exist without a cause. And then this is Weird World War IV, so the weirdness, the weird fiction of that comes out in the end of that story. And that's called the transformation problem. Do you know what the transformation problem is?
I do not, actually. Oh, wait. Transformation? No, I don't. You'll probably start talking, and I may recognize it. Maybe not.
It's an idea that Karl Marx has been called the labor theory of value. And so he was interested in how values are created, like use values and exchange values. But price and value are two different things.
Right.
Even this is not something that Marx did not know. He called it the transformation problem. How do you transform values into prices? So this is something that Marx economists have thought about or dealt with or neglected or dismissed or created their own novel solutions to for a long time. And so the transformation problem it references that and references the transformations that take place in the story, both economically and on the weird fiction level. And it's a little nudge to anyone who's been paying attention to economic debates for the past century or so.
All right, yeah, I definitely enjoyed the story. So everybody should definitely check it out. Now I'm gonna take a quick second to I want to get that story right in the first one.
Sure.
Just because I have this in front of me.
Oh, do you edit these episodes, or this is all going out like this?
Nick, I said I said I haven't spent a single dollar. You'll see an uneven production value. You'll see some stuff. You'll be like, how the heck did he do that? Like, where did that music come from? And then, in every case thus far, this episode will be a little bit of change because I discovered on YouTube that you can get royalty-free music. The music that introduces this episode and the music in the outro, I made in GarageBand.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Literally made it. So, but you'll see some, I don't think I'm going to do the walk. If you look at some of the videos, I kind of walk through the woods and introduce my next guest. And I had a friend at the UN.
It's Robert Stack, huh? Nice.
Yeah, I had a friend. That
reminds me of the second shooter.
I had a friend at the UN. I asked him to watch it, and he's just like, I'm not going to curse, but he's like, what the F is this? It's like this is like high school stuff. This is like you're like walking. I have some gimmick where it looks like you're flying to the city, and it's just like it looks like you're doing it right before that. It looks like you're like walking to your friend's house, and you're about to walk in and interview him and ask him for a sandwich. So again, I'm learning like this. I might break this up into a few segments. But let me give me a quick second to. I want to make sure have the record right so that I should know. We both, both of us should be shamed that we don't have the name of this off the top of our heads. All right, I'm in the right tab. Hold on.
Well, I've published 125 stories. You got to give me a break.
Yeah, Bleak
and
Night.
I thought we were going to talk about the second shooter, not old stories.
Oh, so we both had it wrong. We both had it wrong.
Okay.
It's Bleak Night at Bad Rock. I said
that's better than
Bad Night at Bleak Rock, and you said
Bad Night at Blackrock.
Yeah.
Great, I got two more story titles now. Fantastic.
It's actually good you didn't call it like Bad Night at Blackrock, because then you think it's like BlackRock, the financial institution, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. I think we're going to now move on to a robust discussion of a very interesting topic, and
okay.
So we'll continue this discussion in the next episode.